Hi, my name is Sylvester Chaudhuri. I am the executive director of a nonprofit called CivLab. I'm also one of the co-founders of an event called Smart Cities New York. My focus primarily is on cities, but more specifically on urban tech and urban tech innovation. How do we create the solutions and scale the solutions for tomorrow's next problems happening in the urban environment? I grew up in Manhattan, Kansas. That's the Little Apple, not the Big Apple, where Kansas State University is. My parents were professors. My dad was an Indian immigrant, and my mom grew up in Ohio, but was an Italian immigrant. And I grew up there, then ended up going to Italy, where my family lives. I'm half Italian, half Indian, and learned Italian in a city called Perugia at the Università di Perugia, which is a famous international school in Italy. Following that, I decided I didn't want to come back to the US for university, so I ended up in the UK at a university called Sussex University. I studied economics and philosophy. We recently launched a project called The Grid. It's an initiative that had started out as Urban Tech NYC, a program sponsored and ran by the New York City Economic and Development Corporation. And our goal is to help make the right connections and leverage the community and its resources to help identify problems, create solutions, and scale them together. So I believe for us as a society to not just move forward in a positive direction, but to do so in a way that's not just sustainable from an economic perspective, but also from an aesthetic perspective, it's going to be more important to look at new ways to integrate different types of geniuses. And I would love to see more programming around partnering artists with different types of builders and makers. And I really feel that the future of the world is collaborative, and we would really miss an opportunity if we didn't leverage those great minds and resources we have who can look at the world in a different place, help us frame the world in a different place, and help us build the world in a different place. And the more programs and the first groups who are actually able to go forward with something like that, able to integrate that type of thinking and execute that type of thinking, I believe will be ahead of the curve. I also think, in addition to having artists and engineers in the same room, you also need to have people that understand the customer, that are on the ground and understand, who you're solving these problems for. And we always talk about, before in a startup, if you're ever going to be successful, you have to understand who your customer is. So my vision of the future is to have all these different types of stakeholders in the room discussing and figuring out not just what the best problems are, but what are the most creative and honestly most beautiful. I think another huge part of the future of cities is attraction. How do you make sure the top talent is in your city, especially mega cities? And quite frankly, we saw this with New York City and Brooklyn and San Francisco and Silicon Valley, where Mayor Bloomberg at the time and even Mayor de Blasio has said, there are great things going on in San Francisco in the tech space, but there are great things going on in New York too. And we also have a bigger ecosystem of culture and art here. So there's something more to offer. So I think you can look at this from a micro perspective, which is actually working on projects with artists, but also don't ignore the impact that artists have on your overall ecosystem that bring for innovators and not the next generation of entrepreneurs. How are we ensuring that we're working with folks that are artists and musicians and that are in the cultural field to actually maintain and have upkeep of actually the cultural presence in our local communities, which often is the life and the blood of a local community. So I think sometimes it takes getting creative and looking for additional opportunities, and I'm not just talking about coffee house jobs. I'm talking about actual participation in what the actual community looks like and feels like from a built environment perspective. And so, we are interested in pursuing and looking at more programs that do that not only engage artists to be part of the community, but ensure they stay part of the community as well. I believe that interdisciplinary collaboration is a really important part of, and will actually be an increasingly more important part of the future. the world and how we look at cities is going to change. By 2050, 80% of the world is going to be living in cities. And so we need new minds to start looking at them with us. And I would love to see more programs that engage artists on the innovation and entrepreneurship side.